This episode is sponsored by Cara Brand Consultancy. If you need branding and packaging for your product, Cara is my absolute go-to. She and her team create beautiful and unique branding so your product will impress retailers, stand out on the shelf and look great online. They also offer packaging and e-commerce website designs so you can get everything set up and ready to launch, confident that it looks brilliant. Cara is absolutely fantastic at helping guide you through the process and has been a guest on this podcast twice, in fact. She even designed this podcast artwork for me when I worked with her with my own branding back in 2021, and I can't imagine not having this brand now. If you'd like to chat to Cara about branding for your business, she's offering a free, no obligation call with any of my listeners. You can book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Thank you again to Cara for sponsoring this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hello. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Hannah Spicer. Hannah is an email marketing consultant who helps premium and luxury brands drive more e-commerce sales. She specialises in working with an email tool called Klaviyo, and that's what we're talking about today. We don't just talk about Klaviyo, however, so if you're thinking, oh, actually, I'm using a different tool, will this be relevant for me? Absolutely will. Hannah also talks about email marketing in general and whether it's still effective at driving e-commerce sales. Spoiler alert, it absolutely is. And she talks about the types of emails that we can be sending and, interestingly, about how you can automate emails and what kind of automations you can use, and also how to segment your email list and what this means and why it's useful. So whether you are just getting started with email marketing or you've been doing it for a while and would love to see if it can bring you in more sales, I think you'll find this a really useful and interesting episode, and I would love now to introduce you to Hannah. So hi Hannah, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, thank you for having me.
Can we start with you please give an introduction to you, your business and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Hannah Spicer. I've worked in e-commerce and digital marketing for 20 years now, and I run an email marketing consultancy business that helps premium and luxury brands drive more revenue from their email marketing.
Thank you. So Hannah, the first question I've got for you, and this is probably one on behalf of listeners, is why should we be using email marketing? Does email marketing still drive sales for e-commerce businesses?
Oh yes, hugely. It's actually normally the sale that drives the biggest proportion. The channel that drives the biggest proportion of sales. So 100%. It's what we call a bottom of funnel channel, which means that if you think about the people that you're sending emails to, they've already discovered your brand. They've probably come to your website and they've chosen to share their data with you. So they're actually a very warm and engaged audience. And that tends to be why email has the highest conversion rate across the digital marketing channels and the highest return on investment. So it's a huge area of potential and you should definitely have it as part of your marketing mix.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Because I think that, nowadays everyone's on so many social channels and, everywhere else. So I think that I'm sure there were people wondering, is email still something to think about? So that's really helpful. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd love to talk a little bit about the difference between different types of emails, because whenever I hear or read someone talking about email marketing, sometimes they'll talk about newsletters, sometimes they'll talk about bulletins, sometimes they'll talk about automations. What are the types of emails and the differences for each, please?
Yeah, great question. There's two main types, and I'll try and cover as many terms as I've heard used for each of them. So the first one is what you might call a newsletter. Some people call them trade emails, business as usual emails, and in some email tools like Klaviyo, they're called campaigns. So that essentially is an email that you go into the tool, you create yourself, and you send it one-off. So that might be like new in this week, or a sale launch, or a new collection launch. The other side of things, so the other type of email is either called an automation or a triggered email or a flow. And that's basically an email or a series of emails that you set up and then they run in the background for you. And they are triggering depending on something the user has done. So two of the most common ones that hopefully everyone would be familiar with is one is a welcome flow. When you first sign up to someone's emails, you'll get hopefully an immediate confirmation. And then let's say 2 days later, you might get a follow-up email. And another one as a shopper that will probably be familiar with is an abandoned cart email. So that's when you've gone to a website, you've added something to your cart, but you didn't complete the checkout. And again, you'll typically get a reminder perhaps 1 hour after you've done that. And then if you don't shop, perhaps 24 hours after. So those are two of the kind of most common flows or automations, but there are tens of hundreds that you can create for your customers. In an ideal world, you've got both of those kinds of emails happening at once, because your campaigns help you send timely messages and they keep your brand top of mind. And then your flows respond to what action the user takes off the back of that. So if you've got both, you're going to be getting the most out of your email channel.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I'm not going to ask lots of questions about newsletters or campaigns because I'm sure we've covered that in other episodes, but I would really love to talk a little bit more about automations because as you say, you can set up automations for all kinds of things, can't you? Down to, after the purchase or your product's been shipped or leave a review. There's so many ways these can be used based on what a customer does on your website, assuming you have something that's linking to your website, that is, and we can talk perhaps a little bit more about that. But which of these automations do we really need? If for someone listening, they haven't even thought about automations, maybe they've got their newsletter, that's going out, that's great, but nothing is automatically happening. Which of the automations we absolutely need, and perhaps the ones that we can start with?
Yeah, so I tend to say to prioritize 4 to begin with. So if you're a startup or if you're just getting started with the flow side of things. So 2 of those I've already mentioned. One is the welcome flow, because you obviously want to create a really good first impression when somebody first signs up to your email marketing. And lots of brands will also have a welcome offer. So that is very good at driving sales. It's typically the top sales driver out of all of the flows. The second one is the abandoned cart. So that's obviously really important for as well, kind of recapturing potentially lost sales. The other 2 I'd prioritize are what's called an abandoned browse. That's a bit earlier on in the purchase journey. So that's when someone has come to your website and they've looked at a product, but they didn't add it to bag and they didn't check out. So they've still shown some intent and some interest, but it's again worth kind of triggering some reminder emails to get them to come back and complete their order. And the final one would be a post-purchase flow. Obviously, we don't just want to leave customers who do actually place an order with us. We want to kind of nurture them after that happens as well. And that can be things like, asking them to engage with you on social media, as you said, like asking for a review. But you can also send kind of care or inspiration of how to use or wear your product. And then you can start to try and cross-sell and upsell to them after they place their order. So I really think if you're doing email marketing, you should have those 4 flows in place as soon as possible, really, to get you in a good position.
That's really useful. Thank you. And thank you for giving some examples of what we can put in them as well, because I think that can definitely be something that holds people back from setting them up in the first place is, what do I say? And how easy are these sorts of flows to set up? I'm sure it's going to depend on the service you're using.
Yeah, so I only work with an email tool called Klaviyo because I think it's the best out there for e-commerce businesses. It's got a very strong relationship with Shopify, but also providers like Big and WooCommerce as well. What Klaviyo do have are lots of help articles, but they also have what they call blueprints, which is if you don't really know how to get started, you can start with a blueprint, which is they'll kind of create a basic flow for you, and then you can start to think about what content you want to put in each of those. So it's definitely something that could get you started. And I guess it's worth as well kind of signing up to some of your competitors and going through these journeys on their websites, because we can all see these emails, right? So you could deliberately trigger some abandoned cart emails. You can sign up to welcome emails, of course. That should also kind of give you a sense and some inspiration of how to get started with the flows.
That's a really good tip. Thank you. I hadn't actually thought about signing up to competitors to see what they're doing, but that's a really good idea. I think when you're stuck for inspiration, it's always good to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned Klaviyo there, Hannah, and I have heard of Klaviyo, I'll be honest, but I don't know tons about it. So as well as automations, what else does Klaviyo do that means that, because I know you said this is one that you really recommend.
Yeah.
What else does it do?
So I think for me, Klaviyo stands out because it was built specifically for e-commerce businesses. And that means there's a lot of best practice and easy kind of usability baked into the platform. So there's 4 kind of main sections to Klaviyo. One is the flows that we've talked about. One is forms. So you can also actually kind of build your kind of data capture pop-ups within Klaviyo too, and everything will feed through automatically to your welcome flow. There is campaigns. So those are the newsletters that you want to send. And then there's obviously your kind of customer data section. So you can look at all of your subscribers and shoppers in there and look at kind of endless, really rich information on them as well, actually. So you can also build segments in there. So perhaps you want to build a segment of anyone who visited the site in the last 6 months but hasn't placed an order yet, or anyone who's shopped more than once. And so you can look at your repeat customers. The functionality there is very kind of easy to use as a marketer. You don't have to be a coder or anything like that. It's very kind of user friendly. So those are the kind of main sections. And it's so powerful when you plug it in to Shopify to kind of drive a really good percentage of revenue for you.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And I just want to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago, because you spoke about segmenting your email list. Do you mind breaking down for us what that means?
Yeah, so segmentation is really talking to specific groups of customers depending on their behaviour or particular properties about them. Probably the most common ways to do this are website behaviour. So as I mentioned, you could talk to your existing customers slightly differently to anyone who hasn't shopped with you before, or you could talk to your VIP segment differently. For example, so that might be anyone who shopped more than 3 times with you or has spent over a certain amount. Another really common way is email engagement. So you might want to talk to the people that are kind of opening and clicking and engaging with your emails the most. You might decide to talk to them a bit more frequently. And then those who are showing they're not quite so interested, you might want to kind of taper them off a bit. So those are 2 potential ways to use segments. What I would say is if you've got a smaller database, so let's say potentially less than 5,000 subscribers, and if you've got flows in place, I wouldn't get too concerned about starting to segment. It's probably not worth your while trying to kind of take that database down into smaller groups. Your flows are going to help you talk to people in a relevant way anyway. It's more as your email database starts to grow that you should tend to start to think about that. So don't worry if you're just getting started.
That's really helpful. Thank you. But I assume that once you are ready to start segmenting your database, because you mentioned all these clever things you can do, whether someone's purchased you or not and how many times, is that something Klaviyo can do for you automatically? Can it put all of this in?
Yeah, it's got all of that data because it's looking at your purchase behavior, it's looking at how people are behaving on your site, and it's looking at your email data. So anything you've already got there, it can work on. And you can also plug in other information. So whether it's information from your store POS or your reviews tool or your customer service tool, any data that you can plug into that kind of Shopify and Klaviyo ecosystem can be used to segment your customers.
That sounds really useful. Thank you. And can you even go down to, I don't know, which products people are buying? So I'm just thinking off the top of my head that if someone's buying product A rather than product B, they might need a different follow-up sequence, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. Yeah. So some of my clients who either have fairly small product catalogs, so let's say they might have 9 products if they're kind of I've got like a beauty wellbeing customer who has that smaller catalogue, or brands with bigger catalogues sometimes pick out their kind of 3 best-selling products or categories and create specific versions for those. Exactly. So you can get really relevant and targeted in that way.
That's really helpful. And so you mentioned that you're working with luxury brands at the moment. Are there anything that the brands you're working with, any examples that come to mind? And obviously you don't need to share the brands, of things that people are doing with emails that you think, oh, actually, that's really good. And that's something that another brand could do in their own way, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, I work with premium and luxury brands, but a lot of the kind of strategy and the things that they're doing applies to any product-based business, really. So, as I said, those kind of core strategies of creating flows and talking to people and nurturing them at whatever stage of the life cycle they're at. So, a welcome journey, regardless of the product, is about kind of hopefully showing someone some kind of offer, an incentive, bringing them on board, telling them about your brand, and then trying to nurture them to shop with you for the first time. Abandon browse is about kind of reminding people of your unique selling points and kind of building that trust and getting them to come back and kind of purchase for you. Post-purchase is about kind of nurturing them after they've shopped and kind of cross-selling and upselling to them and hopefully increasing their repeat purchases. So the strategies and the tools are the same. It just, depending on your business and your product, your messaging and your design and your timing will probably be different. But a lot of those things are relevant for everybody.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So actually, I'm thinking that as a business, you could go and look at the emails you get from any business that you're signed up to as a consumer for inspiration in that case, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, I've focused on those kind of priority flows. There are lots of other stages of the journey that you can look at. So another one I really like is called a win back flow, which is if somebody has shopped with you before, but let's say they haven't for, 4 or 6 months, you can then try and incentivize them to shop with you again. So it can feel really targeted and personalized. You can say, dear Vicky, as a valued customer of ours, we've noticed you haven't shopped for a while. We'd love to give you £10 off your next order. That's another really good flow, actually, because it's always cheaper to kind of reactivate an existing customer than acquire a new one. So that's another one to bring into the suite once you're a bit more, you know what you're doing and you've dipped your toe in the water.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I really like that example. I've actually got a few of those recently. It feels like that's something more and more brands are starting to do, actually.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And do you think that this is a bit, maybe slightly off topic, but I'm really curious because you would have had lots of experience of this. Do you feel that consumers, when they're receiving like a flow, whether it's welcome, you've signed up for their site or an abandoned cart or you haven't shopped for a while, do you think customers are expecting to get some sort of benefit from that email? So quite often, for example, I'll get ones from brands where they say, oh, you've left this in your basket, purchase now and get 10% off, as an example. And there are definitely brands where I know that's coming and I maybe don't check out right away because you know that if you don't, you're going to get that email. And hopefully I'm not the only one who does this. Or, as you say, you get something and you get an email saying, well, you haven't shopped for a while. Here's a bonus. Do you think there's an expectation from the consumer that that's happening? And how much do brands need to think about that, I guess, is what I'm saying, because especially for a small business, it's really hard to be building discounts in that much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a really good question. I think customers definitely expect some kind of welcome offer. And I do recommend I think nearly all my clients to have one because it helps build your database and it helps to convert them to a customer. I think in all other instances, you need to be quite strategic and tactical with these promotions. So the example that you talked about of kind of abandoning your cart, I would only ever include an offer in that email when it's the second reminder email. So not the first one, because sometimes people just do need a kind of a nudge and a reminder. But the follow-up email that goes 24 hours later, I would include a code, but only if they've never shopped with you before. So you can make these kind of different journeys for different types of customers. As I said, kind of your existing customers versus your leads. Only offer them incentive if they haven't shopped with you before. Then it's the same as your welcome offer, basically. The win back, I think, is slightly different. And I think, you genuinely are kind of reactivating an existing customer. And I also say at that point, your discount should actually be better than your welcome offer because you should be treating an existing customer more specially than you do a new customer. Those are kind of main places I bring it in. But other places are things like anniversary of first purchase, or you might ask people for their birthday and send them a gift on their birthday. I think as long as you are explaining the reason for the discount in the automation and you're making those codes unique, which you can do very easily if you're using Klaviyo and Shopify. So rather than it being a happy birthday, it's, a mix of numbers and letters that they can't reuse, they can't share. So it feels much more exclusive and exciting. I think those are the ways to make sure you're kind of protecting your margin every way you can.
Thank you. That's so helpful, because it's really hard, isn't it? Because all of us are consumers as well as business owners. So we all want to feel like we're getting that special discount. But also as a business owner, it can be hard to kind of give away margin on every purchase. And I've definitely seen, it's not a bigger brand, I'm not going to name them. There were definitely some bigger brands who seem like they give you a discount every day of the week, but presumably they've planned for that. But as a small business, it's hard.
Yeah, I think we all know those brands. And I do know one of them that builds that into their prices. So they expect that most of their purchases are going to happen at a discount, and that's kind of built in. But yes, I agree. And I think by using those discounts strategically, hopefully it means you can avoid more kind of mass discounting and sale periods as well. So it's a better way to do it.
Yeah, and they also feel more valuable as well. I know that the brands where you very rarely get a discount, and I do think a lot of luxury brands fit in that category. They maybe only do a discount at certain times of the year or certain points for you as a customer. It does for me, it does inspire me to purchase more, because I know that this, I'm not going to be getting that same offer next week, next month, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, you don't have to do discounts. It's not a rule that you have to follow, and it doesn't have to be a percentage off. It could be a monetary value. It could be a delivery promotion. It could be a gift with purchase. It could be an exclusive service or something. So don't feel that you have to, but they do tend to be the most effective in kind of actually driving those sales.
It's really useful advice, though. Thank you, Hannah, because I think actually for me, sometimes free delivery is enough to make that difference. But it's good that,
absolutely.
people can think of different ways and try different things and see what works.
Yeah.
So we've spoken quite a lot about Klaviyo. I would love to know, for anyone who's sort of thinking, oh yes, actually that sounds really good. I mean, for me, the fact that it integrates with all these platforms, I think is a huge bonus. Because I can't remember what I used a long time ago. I had a Shopify site, and I remember I had to copy and paste any subscriber details into my whatever. I can't even tell you what I was using for email. So we're going back a long time. I had to copy and paste them in manually. So I'm sure the fact that everything integrates so well was a big bonus. But how would you go about getting started? Because I feel like for any new piece of software or tool, for a lot of us, there is that thing of, oh gosh, is it just going to be a load of hassle to start doing something new, however good it sounds? So is it easy to get started? How would we do that?
It is. So, I think it's about taking the first step and kind of creating a Klaviyo account and having a little look around. They do have, as I said, blueprints. They've got lots of help articles. They've even got kind of courses you can do, training courses. If you don't want to do that because you're running the entire rest of your business and you're focusing on your other digital marketing channels as well, you can hand that over to somebody else. So that is one of the services that I offer too, which is a kind of full setup for you. And the aim of my service is to take all the heavy lifting out of that. So I would copyright, design, build, and launch all of your flows for you. So hand it over to me, and 4 to 6 weeks later, everything is there, ready, and it's running for you. And then hopefully you feel confident and empowered to kind of go in and send, a weekly campaign to kind of help drive that channel further. But the beauty of Klaviyo is when you've got those flows set up, you don't have to do anything with them on a day-to-day basis. So the bare minimum is you kind of want to check in once a month to just kind of make sure everything is triggering as expected and have a look at the benchmarks, but you haven't actually got to do anything with them. They're running in the background for you.
That's really useful. Thank you. And I've got another question about getting set up. But before I ask you that one, I'd love to know, because I've only thought about this when you said about checking in every month. Does Klaviyo give you any sort of analytics? Can you see how many people are receiving your email, opening your email, clicking, buying?
You can see nearly everything that you would think that you might want to. So they have a lovely dashboard when you first log in, which shows you the percentage of overall site revenue that Klaviyo has driven for you in the last 30 days, which is always really encouraging to see. And then you can see a breakdown of the performance by campaigns and flows. But you can go into any detail you want. So you could go into each individual flow and look at, as you said, who's opened, who's clicked, who's converted. You can even click into an individual email and look at almost like a heat map of where people are clicking on the email. So I think one of the beauties of email is that everything is completely trackable. So yes, you can see all of your metrics, and Klaviyo also will show you kind of benchmark against other clients that they have in your industry. So if you're beauty or if you're apparel or sportswear, whatever it is, they can show you how you're kind of performing against their other clients, which is really useful too.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I like the fact you mentioned you can see sort of the sales you're making from each email as well.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that
really
is the
powerful.
goal. Yeah, because that is the goal, isn't it? And I think especially if you're trialing different emails, perhaps, or you're trying to work out how well your flows are performing, it must be really good to be able to see, are they making me money or not?
Definitely.
And my other question about getting started, sorry, because I'm jumping about a bit, but I suddenly thought of the analytics, is imagine now you've got this huge database in MailChimp or MailerLite or wherever it is. How easy is it to move, what you have already into Klaviyo? Is that a massive headache?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. So because so many businesses have made the move from MailChimp over to Klaviyo, they've actually built an API, which means it's incredibly slick and quick. So you literally kind of copy and paste an API code from MailChimp into Klaviyo and all of your customer data is pulled over, which is brilliant. If there's another email tool you're on which doesn't have that API, it's still not that painful. You essentially need to export your contacts and plug them into Klaviyo and export your unsubscribes, just to make sure that you're reaching out to people who are opted in and you're not reaching out to those unsubscribes. But other than that, it's not a big painful process doing that migration. I've done it for lots and lots of businesses over the last kind of 4 years. And yeah, it's not painful at all.
Thank you. I think that's really reassuring, because I know that I'm trying to think of all the barriers people have when they're thinking about doing
I think, to be honest, I think it's much easier to do that than to try and create these journeys and experiences in one of those other tools which aren't really built for e-com. So I know like MailChimp are doing some work to try to catch up with the things that Klaviyo are doing, but MailChimp is an email tool for anybody. It's for service providers, it's for small business, it's for anybody, whereas Klaviyo is built for e-com. So it's got so much best practice and clever tools and things that you can do just baked in. So I would say just the initial pain of migration, which isn't big, is so worth it, because you'll quickly see a return on that project.
That makes sense. And is Klaviyo the only mail platform that's designed for e-commerce? Because I think it's the only one I've heard of.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. There are some bigger kind of enterprise tools which some more kind of established retailers use. So there's one called Emetria, which has more kind of CRM baked in. There's one called Ecommerce, which I used in my last in-house role at Kurt Geiger. I think it's probably the best for, if you're on Shopify, you're probably best on Klaviyo. It just works so well with that platform. So yeah.
That's really helpful. I thought I'd ask, because then you saved everyone going off and doing the research. They've got the answer to that now. And before we wrap up, Hannah, was there any other sort of things you hear from people when they're considering Klaviyo that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to cover?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered all the key areas. I think you can get, a demo. You can also sign up on a free version, so you haven't got to kind of commit and start paying anything and sign a contract or anything like that. You can really have a good look around the tool and see that it works for you before spending any money. So that would be another thing to say.
That's really helpful. Thank you. So my final question, Hannah, is what would your number one piece of advice be regarding email marketing, specifically for e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, so I think what's really important is to send regular emails. That sounds very simple, but I think lots of businesses feel a bit reticent, that they think they're going to bombard their subscribers, or they're not finding the time to prioritize it. And I think that's a huge mistake, because hopefully they'll probably know that every time you send an email, you do drive sales, and your subscribers have shared their data with you and they want to hear from you. And if you email too infrequently, they'll almost kind of forget who you are or whether they signed up with you in the first place. So please don't hold back. please do send frequently, whether that's once or twice a week, and then also set up these flows so they're helping you get more emails out too, because you'll see the results in terms of the revenue.
That's brilliant advice, Hannah. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you've shared. So we're going to link to your website and your socials and everywhere people can find you in the show notes for the episode. So thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. Hi, this is just a little note to say if you've enjoyed this episode, or indeed any of the episodes, and you would like to, I don't know, buy me a coffee or something, you can actually now leave tips. So there's a link to how to do this in the show note. Of course, do not feel obliged to do this. This is a free podcast. This will always be a free podcast. But as I say, if you want to buy me a coffee, you can do that via the link in the show notes.